folks, welcome back to the Pharmacy Seeds Network. We're here for another video about controlled grow environments. This one we're going to talk about safety and wiring. We're going to go into a lot of details about safety and wiring. But before we do that, let me just explain the technology here for those who aren't familiar. I know most people are probably familiar with FLIR cameras now, but if you're not, a FLIR camera, FLIR stands for forward-looking infrared, and it's basically a camera that detects the infrared spectrum rather than the visible light spectrum. Why is that important? Well, it's important because in the infrared spectrum, we're unable to see with our eyes visually. But when we have a camera like this, we can take all of that data and convert it to a spectrum that gives us a visual color that indicates the temperature of an object. And that gives us a tremendous ability to look into something and see how hot it is, how cold it is, what flow is going on. So many intimate details within that. So what we're going to do is go over the controlled grow environment that I have here, the AC Infinity 10x10 tent. That's wired with all sorts of controlled grow lighting, timers, humidifiers, airflow controls, and automation. And all of that requires some level of power. And that power needs to be distributed safely and cleanly in a way that keeps connections cool, and in a way that keeps those connections, electrical connections, safe and away from sources of water, shorts, and any other sort of potential fire hazard. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But before we do that, the shop that I work at, we have a 1500 watt infrared heater, and the shop that we work at was not designed to have big heavy electrical heater loads in that shop. So we're running that heater at the top edge of what that circuit breaker, really above what that circuit breaker should be handling. And so the other day when I was over there, it occurred to me that I should take some FLIR video of that and demonstrate exactly why you shouldn't overload power circuits. So we're going to go into that first so you have an understanding of what happens and why, and then we're going to go into how to do things right. So an example of what not to do, followed by an example of what to do. Alright, so here we are in the shop. I'm going to throw a point and a rectangle up here so we can look at temperatures. I'll just show you, I've been working on this window frame here with the heat gun. You can see the obvious hot spots where I've been cooking it to get the material out there. But I wanted to give an example of what an overloaded circuit looks like, because you shouldn't be doing this in your grow rooms, in your houses, or in your shop. We kind of don't have a choice in this shop due to how the power is arranged here. But here's the breakers. We'll just take a look at those. They're not too awfully hot, but that left one is what the high power heater is on. That's a 1500 watt radiant heater on that. You can see that breaker's a lot warmer. And you can see some heat in that box off some of those wires. We got wires there. They're showing some hot spots. I'm pretty sure I saw an 80-degree peak back in there. So let's just follow this power lead. So this is our incoming power. You can see that's fairly cool. That's sitting at 68 degrees. And then here's one of our power leads going out. That goes up to lights, I believe. That's only sitting at about 65 at the look of it. And then, yeah, okay, that one's feeding the heating unit. So that one's not under a tremendous load. But you can see on the heating unit where the radiant heat coils are, we have 114 or so in there as a comparison. And then that 1500 watt heater is plugged in on this extension cord. And this is what you don't want to see in a grow room or in your house or on any other circuit load. And the reason for that is this breaker is underrated for the power that we're driving on the circuit. We're running a 1500 watt heater on a 15 amp breaker, 20 amp breaker. Let's look at that. It's a 20 amp breaker. From what I read, 1466 watts or something like that is about max you should run on a 20 amp breaker. and we're exceeding that at 1500, and then we have heat guns coming on and off on that same box, not on that circuit, but on that box, and that really loads the crap out of the circuit. So let's just have a look at the extension cord here. You can see how hot this socket is, sitting at 115. You never want that in your house, man. If you got a contact on this cord that starts to corrode or get a little bit of carbon on it, that'll start to heat up. You could have glowing orange and fire very quickly from that. So I only leave this plugged in when I'm here at the shop. I unplug it when I'm not here, and I keep a close eye on it. We have fire extinguishers handy. You know, we take extra precautions as a result of that. But just take a look at how hot this cord is here, even on the floor. Right? It's down on an icy cold floor. That floor is sitting at what, 56. And then again, where we connect here, you're going to see a jump again with the contact point there, sitting up at 99. And we go up the cord a ways away from the heat, and it's down more like close to 78, right? So, and I'll just give you a shot of the heater. I can't point this FLIR camera at that heater for very long because it can damage the lens. But that's an example of what not to do in your grow rooms. Now, let's go take a look at my grow room, and we'll see how power is distributed safely and carefully. So first, from a visual perspective, we'll just take a look at what we're going to look at here. There's the Metagrow lights, the timer, light bar, ballast, infrared, UV supplementers on the sides, your main light bars. You see the other Y over there. You can see the master power extension cord feeding in to this light bar. You can see where this other monster light bar failed. We'll talk about that at some point. Possibly not even in this video. Right, where that failed, so I switched the timer over back to the main master power cord. These are 12/3 extension cords, so they're pretty heavy gauge power cords, and I only put one light per power cord. That's one light per circuit, because each of these watts, although I don't run them on full power most of the time, or at least most of them don't run at full power most of the time, at full power, these are 780 watts. This is 880 watts. So what we're really looking at is close to a kilowatt per light at full power. So that's a lot of juice. You wouldn't want to put two of those on 120 amp circuit. You would be far exceeding your 1400 watt limit. And I looked that up, and I'm pretty sure it was 1400 watts or a little bit more max for a 20 amp breaker. Personally, I don't like to put more than a kilowatt on any circuit, 20 amps or less, especially, you know, any circuit 20 amp rated basically. I don't want to put more than a kilowatt on that. I don't want to see more than 10 amps at 110 volts on that, which is actually a bit more than a kilowatt. It's about 1200 watts. So just a perspective on that, a few extra details, a glance at things from a visual perspective here, so you can see visually what you're looking at before we go into FLIR and study things. We'll just take a quick look over here so you can see the fans and just have a good visual reference of what you're looking at when you come back in here with FLIR. This is the ultrasonic humidifier. We'll get a shot of that with a FLIR camera too, just so you can get a perspective. All right, so now here we are in FLIR, and you can see how warm those lights are, those Ys, the Metagrow Y lights. The Spectrum X is off and has been off for a while. You can see how that's fairly cool. We'll throw up a point and a line, but we'll throw a line for a gradient and a point, so you can get an idea of the spectrum of temperatures here. We'll take a close look at this. So this timer running around 104, 105. Right? I don't mind that too much. I don't mind 104, 105. I don't like seeing 110, 115 like we saw in the shop there. That's just too close to easy to go into thermal runaway. So let's take another look here. We'll take a look at this timer. Yeah, and see, that's a good example. This timer is not carrying any current right now because this X light is off. Oh wait, that's the wrong one. All right, let's take a look now at the other timer that's off. Okay, so that is the timer that goes to the X. Power's been off for that for close to 3 hours. So that's had a chance to cool down. That's still sitting around 99 degrees. That tells us that most of the temperature that we're seeing up top here is resident temperature. And I can tell you, I can feel that resident temperature up here. That's heat just rising from the lights before it gets exhausted out by the fan. So let's just talk about the thermodynamics of that real briefly while we're doing it. Notice the fan is mounted pretty much as high as I can get it in the tent so that we take the hottest air out, because that's one of the biggest things we're trying to remove from a controlled and grow environment is heat. And then we're trying to exchange air on top of that. But that makes a huge difference in how much heat you extract, how high you mount that fan. So we always put our exhaust fan as high as possible. We put our carbon filter on the intake side of that so that we draw negative pressure through it. And then that way, these protective cover filters that go over protect them. So hot air out the top. And we'll just come back over here. I don't know if you'll be able to see this very well on FLIR, but we'll look at it. Yeah, I guess you can. So coming in the bottom, that's the cool air inlet. There's one here. It's a 4-inch tube. And there's another one back there in the corner that runs up and comes in right behind the circulator fan, so that fresh air inlet goes directly to the back side of the circulator fan. And then I've set that up so that the humidifier and the circulator fan work together. So the circulator fan is distributing that humidity around, and that other air inlet comes in behind the humidifier, so that as the humidifier draws air in and humidifies it, it draws fresh air and humidifies it. So we're basically conditioning that air as it flows into the grow chamber. That's important. And this is the other power cord for the other light, the one that's directly over top of our heads right now. And we'll just take a look at that as well for temperatures. How's that looking? Yeah, it looks like about 80, 86, 87, 88 in that range. And that's not much over 105. And then, yeah, our ballasts are always going to run a little bit warmer than that. They're going to sit around 120 or so, 115. 123 there, 125. Yeah. So those are all normal temperatures. Now let's go have a look at a breaker box and a couple of outlets just to get an idea. So we're over here in the corner where the power feed extension cords come out of the tent. Again, I'll mention that those are independent cords for each light array. And you'll notice that those are nice and cool. We're sitting at 67 on that cord. And this other one is, well, that must be the X that's off, sitting at 65. So yeah, we can even tell which cord has the the lit light and which one has the power off. So that's another excellent example of how much difference there is. So every time we pull power through a power cord, we're losing some of the energy coming through that cord in heat. And so this is another reason to run the biggest diameter wire you can run, because you have less loss. Less loss is more power delivered. It's less voltage loss, it's less current loss, and it's less wattage loss. And consequently, you're not buying more power to throw it away. So you're actually saving yourself power in doing that. Just some basic understanding, just some basic concepts to understand to illustrate my point. I hope I don't get too lectury, but you know. So, which breakers do you think are carrying lights? Yeah, that one sitting around 90. 92, 93, I'm okay with that. And that one, sitting around 70. So, that says we're running at safe temperatures. And let's just take a look at these two. I should mention too, by the way, your points that are going to get hot are all your contact points. So your point where your breaker plugs into your box, for those who've never had an electrical box apart, these breakers actually they kick in one side and they lock into the box. It's a really hard plunge in, but it's basically still just a friction contact. So those can get corroded. They can build up, electrolysis between the contacts. They use metals that are supposed to reduce that, and they're pretty good at that. But ultimately, anytime you make a contact that isn't a direct soldered or welded connection, you're going to have a point where you're going to develop heat. So that means breaker points, sockets, and extension cord ends. So now here we are looking at the end of an old heavy-duty air conditioner extension cord that I used to use for power cords for grow lights. Now granted, my old grow light equipment, those were 400 watt lights, so we weren't carrying quite as much power, but still those lights being less efficient would probably draw 500 watts, 600 watts on startup, and then I know the digital ones would go down to about 370 continuous once they got running, so they weren't too bad on power. But look at all the corrosion on here, and I want to point out especially, you can actually see where the carbon is starting to form here. Now, you can take a cord like this real easy with some steel wool or some sandpaper and clean those contacts up and make that safe again. So if you've got a good extension cord that the contacts are just a little corroded on, just brush them up, clean them up with some sandpaper. Real simple solution. But this cord is super old. And in the interest of safety and having brand new high quality power feeds for everything, since everything else is brand new high quality, and in keeping with safety standards, I upgraded everything. So now we got all brand new 12-3 25-foot extension cords, isolated on separate circuits, separate timers, separate everything. And on top of that, I monitor and inspect with the FLIR camera frequently. So that way we stay safe. Yeah, don't burn yourself out, man. Check for hot spots. And you'll notice mine aren't hot. What are we sitting there? 68 on the one that's lit and 67 on the one that's off. So that says we're only up 1 degree, even when we're running 700 and some watt light on the other end. So that's what you want to see. That's a good example of how to distribute power safely. So I hope this advice finds you well, and you'll take it to heart and heed my safety precautions, because they are important. Lots of people have burned themselves out of their houses for not understanding some of these basic concepts. I did promise a peek into the ultrasonic humidifier. So that's the water spurting up there, but you notice the water actually looks warmer around the ultrasonic transducers there. Well, that's because the ultrasonic transducers are imparting enough energy for that water to be able to atomize. And it's doing that primarily through frequency and resonance, but it does require a certain amount of energy. So I just thought I would give another shot at it. So one other thing I wanted to point out about power safety, I went on a lot about making sure your power connections stay cool, but I did not go into this part, and I want to point it out here. And actually, this is a mistake here. So this power cord is supposed to come in and stay outside of the spill tray, like that. Okay, so this is a spill tray here, so that's a water catch. So if we have a flood, that spill tray will contain the water and not let it out into the main tent. That's one thing. The other thing is every connection I make, I keep at least 3 feet off the floor of the tent. I tend to go even higher than that, and this I probably should raise higher. You want those power connections because those are your points where if you have water spill, you can have a short. Those are your points where water can seep in those cracks, right? The cord itself is sealed, but these connection points are not. And so I always like to keep these up high in the tent as high as possible, preferably ceiling height. And that's why you'll notice that most of my wiring, most of my power feeds, they all come in up high, okay? And where they come in down low, like over here, like I said, we go through that spill tray and we go immediately up. And then that's where we jump over to the power bar, and that stays high as well. That keeps our power and all of our potential fire hazard reduced even further by keeping power separate from the potential of water spills and other accidents like that. And look at that, it's sunset. It's sunset. Better let the plants go to bed. Oh wait, not quite sunset. I'd say that's a pretty perfect transition, huh? All right, well you can see it's a bit chilly out here, and I've come outside to illustrate some more points about power. Well, what do we got over here? What's this glowing box? Yeah, that's the transformer. What's that sitting at? Looks like the outside of that is sitting at about 28 or so. Oh, whoops, I'm off with the point. 38. And then background veg sit around 28, 29. Some of the trees have a little more heat to them than some of the other vegetation does. But what we're really out here to look at is power box, power meter. So that's in conduit, so we can't really see those cords. But we can look in here and see if we see any heat in there. Unfortunately, it's really hard to illustrate it here. That's a shame. But we can have a look and see if we see any Sasquatch off in the woods, I guess, while we're out here. I don't see any Sasquatch out there. Or anything else warm and moving. So, that's a reasonably brief rundown on power distribution safety for controlled grow environments, grow tents, etc. Obviously that applies to any industry. Keep it safe. Distribute power loads evenly. Make sure that you have adequate power cords to supply power for what you're running. If you don't know, check with someone who's qualified and find out. You know, all of the equipment sold in the U.S. is supposed to be UL listed and certified, should have wattages, voltages, all that kind of stuff on it. You can look that stuff up, you can calculate those numbers, and if you don't know how to do that, get a hold of someone who does and have them do that to make sure that you're operating within safe parameters. Alright, so that's it. If there's other stuff you'd like to see on FLIR or anything else you want to know, question, comment, like, subscribe, share, you know the deal. Thanks for watching the Pharmacy Seeds Network, and remember, keep your friends close and your farmers closer.